Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at 6:30 p.m. This is a special board meeting being held on August 5th, 2021. We have a quorum with all members present, with Trustee Lambert on speakerphone. Would you please join me in a moment of silence to observe as you feel appropriate? All right, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Ms. Vossick, are there any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chairman. If you wish to address the board, you must fill out a card and submit it before the presiding officer calls the meeting to order. While speakers generally have 5 minutes to address the board, the presiding officer may establish an overall time limit for public comment and adjust the time allotted to each speaker when necessary to accommodate a large number of speakers. However, no speaker shall be given less than 1 minute. While the board values hearing from members of the public, trustees may not respond to comments as they are prohibited by law from discussing or deciding any subject that is not on the board's publicly noticed agenda. Speakers having complaints against individual district employees or trustees may only address the board after filing a complaint form and in the manner provided for in applicable board policy DGBA for employee complaints, F and G for student and parent complaints, and GF for public complaints. The presiding officer or designee shall determine whether a speaker has filed a complaint according to policy. Any speakers who complain of individual district employees or trustees during public comment will be directed by the presiding officer to stop addressing the board and will refer the speaker to the appropriate complaint policy. As you come forward, please state your name. Our first speaker is Heather Foster.
Dr. Nivens and trustees, my name is Heather Foster. I am the parent of an incoming 8th grader at Reading Junior High. I have been an active parent volunteer since 2013, a Campbell PTO board member, a Polly Ryan RCO board member, and for the past 3 years, a parent member of the district-wide Student Improvement Council. I tell you all of this because I love our school district, but at this moment, I am very disappointed. I think you could do so much more to create a safe environment for our students, teachers, and staff as they are about to return to school. I have reviewed the proposed parent letter concerning COVID-19 protocols for the upcoming school year, and I am very concerned that LCISD is not doing enough. With regard to face coverings, I understand that the district is waiting for guidance from Governor Abbott and TEA, but I ask you to do more. Please use your voices to let them know that face coverings need to be mandated by the school district, and in the meantime, strongly encourage all students, teachers, staff, and campus visitors to wear masks and provide them if possible using ESSER funds. The Center for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend that all people ages 2 and older wear a mask to help stop the transmission of COVID-19, especially with the new Delta variant spreading. Leaving the choice up to individual parents will not result in a safe environment for those children who are not yet eligible to get a vaccine, or for unvaccinated older students, teachers, and staff. I witnessed this firsthand this week at Reading when my son attended a basketball camp. Even though there were children as young as 2nd grade participating, my fully vaccinated son was one of only a few students to wear a mask, and he did not see any staff members wearing a face covering. Masks are most effective if everyone uses them. With regard to virtual instruction, I believe it is disingenuous to state that lack of student interest is one of the reasons not to offer it. In fact, the Digital Scholars Program was only offered to 9th through 12th grades, and registration ended May 31st, when our community health was improving. the information given to parents stated that the Digital Scholars Program was not offered as a response to COVID-19. I ask that you consider using ESSER funds to offer virtual learning for kindergarten through 6th grade at a minimum, since those children are not yet old enough to be vaccinated. My son was a virtual student last year, and we were very pleased with the experience. With regard to campus operations, I ask you please continue the use of directional hallways and staggered class transitions, arrival, and departure procedures. With schools at or over capacity, using last year's procedures to alleviate crowding during transitions would be very helpful. I would also ask that parent volunteers and visitors be limited to only essential personnel. During lunch times, I ask that every effort be made to socially distance students using outdoor areas and classrooms if necessary so that the cafeteria won't be overcrowded. Please do not allow visitors to eat lunch with the students. Finally, I would ask that you work with Fort Bend County to offer the free COVID-19 vaccinations to everyone ages 12 and up by allowing our school parking lots to be used as vaccination sites after school hours and on weekends. By providing a convenient location and using supportive messaging, it will demonstrate a culture of support for vaccines, and it can have a positive effect on those who are hesitant. Fort Bend County is currently at the orange threat level for COVID-19 transmission, and Harris County was raised to red today. As we know, many of our staff and teachers reside in Harris County, and our community members travel frequently between counties. Please take every action available to you to keep our children safe. Be the one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Pickering.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Pickering. I'm a parent of an incoming kindergartner at Dickinson Elementary. As parents, sending our child to Big Kids School for the first time is already an emotional milestone. It's made infinitely harder this year because it has become a life or death decision. What are our options? Our son has to attend school. He has to attend in person because my husband and I both have to work. If masks are not worn universally, he is almost guaranteed to catch COVID-19. If he catches it, he will bring it home to his unvaccinated brother and to me, his immunocompromised mother. And then it's a game of Russian roulette. I am deeply concerned that masks will only be made optional and not required during the upcoming school year. I realize this stems from the governor's executive order that bans mask mandates, but as our children's and teachers' advocates, I hope that you will fight to keep them safe. The CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics have both made public recommendations for universal masking in schools for both teachers and students, even those who are vaccinated. I strongly encourage you to adopt a universal masking guideline. No other safety measures besides vaccines can compare in terms of effectiveness, and our children under the age of 12, including my kindergartner, are not eligible to be vaccinated yet. Another important tool that is highly effective when utilized with universal masking is the use of medical-grade air purifiers and increased ventilation. I strongly recommend that the Board of Trustees allocate ESSER funds toward the purchase of medical-grade air purifiers for all classrooms and encourage teachers and staff to open windows and doors to the outside for better airflow. At the same time, I encourage enhanced compartmentalization within the school so that students and teachers are potted together to reduce contact with other classes, including lunches eaten in the classroom or outside instead of in a shared cafeteria. Similarly, I request that social distancing guidelines be followed. The virus we are combating is not the same virus we fought in 2020. The new Delta variant is 2 to 3 times more contagious than the original virus, and it is causing more severe disease in children. Locally, case counts and hospitalizations in Fort Bend County have seen exponential growth in the last 2 weeks alone, and school hasn't even begun yet. Of even more concern is that the local children's hospitals have already reached full capacity, dealing with a surge in RSV cases. There is no extra capacity to handle another COVID-19 wave, and yet that wave is already bearing down on us. We need to keep our children out of the struggling hospitals right now, and that means we need to prevent our unvaccinated children from catching COVID-19. Our best tools to do that are universal masking and enhanced ventilation and air purification. I don't want either of my children to become another statistic. Without universal masking in Lamar ISD schools, we are sending our children into an unsafe learning environment. A petri dish, ticking time bomb. Without masks, every child will get COVID-19 at some point. Some will be hospitalized. Some may have lifelong damage. Some will die. Some will have parents who die. And right now, our community is being prevented from using the only proven method of preventing spread of this virus. If a Lamar ISD student catches COVID-19 and ends up dead, will you be able to say with a clear conscience that you did everything you possibly could to prevent that death, knowing the current conditions and risks and recommendations? If you tell me that you can't require masks because of Governor Abbott's executive order, I will tell you that you are not trying hard enough. We require that kids wear closed-toed shoes to school to protect their feet. We can require masks that cover their noses and mouths to protect their developing lungs, hearts, and brains. Call it a uniform change. Call it anything you want.
Ms.
Raise-
Pickering, your time is up. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tion Stephen.
Computer so she can see the time.
It's up on the screen.
Excuse me, Mr. Lambert dropped off back.
Okay.
Sorry, just 1 minute.
Mr. Lambert?
Okay, you may address the board.
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear your name, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Tion Stephen. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and community stakeholders. My name is Tion Stephen, and I'm a parent of elementary students at Frost Elementary. The reason I'm coming before you this afternoon is to request that the board reconsider their decision to not offer virtual school to elementary school students. One of the main reasons that was given for not offering virtual school is that the costing. I'm asking that the funds that were allocated for the digital program be allocated to the elementary school students at this time. The priorities to me should be placed on the elementary school students because, for one, they fall in the category of students who are unable to be vaccinated at this time. They are all under the age of 12. And with that in mind, that's the reason why I'm asking that the virtual school be offered to parents who would like to have that option available to them. The data is already available to the school, and you would not have to incur any increased costs in trying to figure out how to put the system in place because you already have data from the 3rd to 5th grade with regard to STAR grades, and you also have their academic in-school grades to determine, okay, if the students did okay with the virtual school academically, you can use that as a criteria to say, well, then yes, you can be given the option. And of course, an exception should be made for those who have persons at home that are compromised health. An exception should be made for those persons. So in light of that, that's the reason why I'm coming before you today to ask that the virtual school be provided for the elementary school students, especially since as of August 3rd of this year, Fort Bend County has now increased the risk level from low to significant. And then based upon their own criteria on the website, this means that there should be proper social distancing of 6 feet, and other restrictive interaction measures should be put in place. As of this time, that's going to put a burden upon the schools in order to provide that with a full population. Virtual school would be a good option to relieve that population in the classroom and have a smaller classroom setting, which established education statistics have shown that a lower teacher-to-student ratio does result or correlate with increased academic performance. And so for that reason, I'm asking that the board at this time consider offering the virtual school for elementary school students. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. With board consensus, we are adjusting the order of the agenda action items, and we'll actually begin with action item A2 on page 6, which is the discussion and possible action on 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocol. And Lindsay, before you get started, no, you can come up. I just wanted to say a few things. So before she shares the updated protocols, I wanted to provide some insight of the board's involvement prior tonight of the proposed protocols. The administration provided a proposed draft of updated protocols last week and asked the trustees for feedback. The administration then edited the proposal to include the individual input or an agreeable compromise and shared it with all of the trustees. So what is proposed tonight includes trustee feedback, with the exception of today's TEA mandates regarding lab-confirmed COVID-19 positive test protocols and isolation and virtual instruction. I believe those are the two exceptions.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So you should each have the updates on your desk, and I'll kind of just walk through all of these. I'm going to just kind of scroll on the screen, but you should all have it in front of you as well. So I want to start out, we have the parent letter first, and that kind of goes over some of the high level protocols, but I'll get down into it where we have all of the details there. And I want to start out by just mentioning all of these protocols are subject to change based on local, state, CDC guidance, and so we have that disclaimer on here as well. We'll start with the overview. We're preparing to begin the new school year and welcome students back. We're continuing to work with our local and state health officials to monitor the spread of COVID in the community. And then we're committed to creating a safe learning environment for our students and staff. And so to ensure those safe learning experiences this year, we're going to kind of go through some of the protocols that are going to be in place. So first, for virtual instruction, and this is an area, as you mentioned, that changed a little bit. The district is currently researching some virtual learning options for a limited number of students for the upcoming school year. This option would be provided for families who, and we want to be clear, this is for families who are fearful of the disease and who don't want to send their students in person. It won't be open to every single family, but it will be open to a limited number of students. And then we will continue to serve our immunocompromised students separately on a case-by-case basis through our homebound services. And then students who may qualify for the district's homebound services should contact our special education department. That number is included. And then our Lamar CISD staff who would like to request an accommodation would contact our human resources department. And then moving down into the disease mitigation protocols, face coverings. Face coverings will be optional, and parents can decide whether or not their children will wear a face mask to school. The district will support any student or staff member who chooses to wear a face mask. And then staff can contact support services if they would like to request PPE or face coverings in classes. For the screening protocols, staff will be required to self-screen for COVID-19 symptoms before they come to work each day. And then parents and guardians are expected to screen their students each day before sending them to school. Plexiglass dividers will be available upon request from parents or guardians, and then teachers will be able to give parents a little bit more information about that at the time of the request. For hand washing and sanitizing, hand sanitizer will be available at the main entrance to the campus, in classrooms, office areas, in the cafeteria, outside of nurses' clinics, and in common areas throughout each campus. Staff will be expected to regularly wash and sanitize their hands, and students will also be expected to wash their hands thoroughly after recess, going outdoors, before and after eating, following restroom breaks, and before and after sharing any shared supplies. And then for cleaning and disinfecting, each district facility will be cleaned and disinfected daily, including the high-touch surfaces. Cafeteria tables will be cleaned between lunch periods, and then district facilities will be e-misted once a month. And this is another area that changed significantly, positive cases on campus. So if a student or staff member tests positive, first they need to inform their principal or their supervisor of the positive case. We won't be conducting contact tracing this school year, but per TEA directives, we do still need to report the positive cases to TEA and to the county. So for those isolation protocols, if a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19, and this comes directly from the language that was given, they're expected, any individual with a lab confirmed COVID-19 positive test, or if they're expected of having COVID-19, shall be excluded from attendance from school and work. Exclusion shall continue until the readmission criteria is met, and this criteria is below. If they're symptomatic, they will have to be excluded until at least 10 days have passed since the symptoms came on. They have to be fever-free, and fever-free is defined as fever-free for 24 hours without the use of fever-suppressing medications. And then their other symptoms have to have improved as well. Individuals who test positive but don't have any symptoms must stay at home at least 10 days after the day that they were tested. And this is something else that TEA announced today. During the exclusion period, while students are out due to COVID-19, the district can deliver remote conferencing services to students at home. So this would be a temporary synchronous virtual learning option for these students, and not to exceed 20 school days during the 2021-22 school year. We will have a link here that will have a little bit more information on the remote conferencing information. And then staff members with a lab confirmed positive case must use their own absence accruals unless they're enrolled in the district's COVID-19 sick leave bank. And Dr. Bowen's going to touch a little bit on that.
Okay. So in addition to our traditional catastrophic illness sick leave bank, the district is going to create a COVID sick leave bank. And employees at the beginning of the fall semester will donate 2 of their own local days should they become ill, get a lab confirmed positive test, and then need to quarantine or isolate for the days as identified. We would then give them a total of 6 days. So it would be their 2 plus an additional 4 to meet their isolation period. We will open enrollment again in the spring semester. So if they use their days in the fall and they are fearful that there might be another instance where they would need them in the spring, they would have the same opportunity to enroll again at the spring, or staff that didn't enroll in the fall in the sick leave bank and wish to do so in the spring could do so at that time as well.
And so, for the reason why we chose 6 is because it's calendar days, and typically both the weekends will count into that. And so that would also help us with the number of bank days that we have. And so we just assume that someone gets sick on a Friday, they have 2 weekends in there, so it'll be 6 business days that they would need out of the bank. And so that's why we chose number 6.
How long do they have to make that decision whether they want to put those?
We have an open enrollment period that's going to run, it will start August 23rd. The forms will actually go up as soon as we're done tonight. They should go up either through September 15th for the fall period, and then the spring period will be January 1st through February 15th. So they have about a month, a little over a month.
Okay, thank you.
So if they do not donate 2 days to the bank and they get COVID, they just use their normal
Correct.
sick leave?
Correct.
Is that correct?
So typically, what has been a direction from the agency, and so we know the federal government stopped the COVID sick days, the federal days. And so we were directed that if someone gets sick, then they use their own personal days to get sick and or to get better. And so what we decided to do was give our employees an option to be able to, opt in to this COVID leave bank. And so if they feel it's necessary to be able to do that, then we want them to be able to have that protection. But they don't have to. But like I said, if they do get ill, then they have to use their own personal days while they're out. And if they exhaust all their leave, they can qualify for some job
And so, let's see, the next section, exposure and quarantine. Excuse me. Lamar, like I mentioned, Lamar CISD will not conduct contact tracing this year or quarantine individuals. But compulsory attendance does still apply for students, and this, while we won't be placing students or staff in quarantine, it's possible they could still be placed in quarantine by their physician, by the county, or by their parent. And so they would need to provide documentation to the campus. And they are also offered, they will also be able to participate in the remote conferencing that TEA has offered. So any student who has tested positive and has to be out, or if their parent chooses to keep them home and quarantine them due to close contact exposure, those are the students who will be able to do the remote conferencing and still be counted and still learn just remotely. I think that's, yeah, that was mentioned in the last bullet there. And then COVID-19 notifications. The district may notify parents and staff via a daily email if there's a confirmed positive COVID case on their campus. The protocols for campus visitors. If the county's COVID-19 risk level is at red, all district campuses and facilities will screen visitors during the school day, and staff will utilize virtual meetings and electronic communications as necessary. After school groups and parent organizations, as well as other visitors, can visit the campuses before and after school hours and during student holidays. Any parents who wish to have lunch with their students can do so, but each campus will designate an area for parents to be able to do that and sit with their students. And then ARD 504 and LPAC meetings can be held virtually or in person at the request of the parent or guardian, and campuses would need to designate an area near the front of the building for those meetings. And for campus operations, many of the operations are going to return to normal for this school year. Campuses will no longer have directional hallways, class transitions, and arrival and dismissal procedures will return to normal. Campuses can plan after-school events such as dances and proms. They'll be able to attend in-person field trips and student competitions as well. And then staff can attend in-person professional development as necessary. For transportation, buses will be regularly cleaned, focusing on high-touch areas such as bus seats, steering wheels, and door handles. And at this time, all athletics and fine arts facilities will continue as normal. The gym and stadium and auditorium capacity is back at 100%, but we'll continue to work with TEA and the UIL to make updates with board approval as necessary. And some breakfast and lunch protocols. All students will continue to receive their breakfast and lunch at no cost during the 21-22 school year, and this is due to an updated USDA waiver. All meals will be served using the offer versus serve method, as opposed to the straight serve method where all meal components are placed on the trays. Elementary breakfast will continue to be served as grab-and-go style. Lunches will no longer be prepackaged, and milk boxes will be utilized this year. Keypads will be reinstated at all cash registers. Cash and checks will be accepted for student lunch accounts and a la carte items. However, change will not be given, and the excess amount will just be placed back into the student's meal account. And then the sale of a la carte items will start on the first day of school for secondary campuses and the first week of September for elementary campuses. And then child nutrition staff will sanitize the serving lines between each lunch and can provide sanitizing solution and gloves upon request to clean the cafeteria tables. And finally, sanitation procedures for shared technology devices. Students will need to share technology equipment or bring their own for on-campus instruction. Students are expected to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer before and after using the shared device. And when retrieving and returning the laptops or iPads, they would need to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer prior to retrieving the item, retrieve only their device, and then when the student is done working, make sure to return only their shared device to the proper location. So that is it for the protocols, it's kind of the high level, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I have some questions. So if a student has a confirmed case of COVID, that student has to have a doctor's note to get back in school, is that correct?
That is,
No, they do not. They need to meet the criteria, which is the 10 days have passed since the onset of symptom, 24 hours fever-free without fever-reducing medication, and their symptoms have improved.
Okay. The section that says exposure and quarantine, the second point, it says any student placed in quarantine will, by an outside entity, a physician, county, or parent will need to provide documentation to the campus for the absence to be excused.
Correct. And that's, since we're not quarantining staff this year, if a family member is ill and the physician decides to quarantine the whole family, we would need documentation regarding the quarantine. And it could be the parent sending a note that says, based on dad's positive test, we're having to quarantine, the doctor has suggested that or recommended that we quarantine the whole family.
So a child who has sniffles or a cough, a traditional, before COVID, we would all think it's just a traditional cough or something. That's what's going to happen to that student in the day-to-day function of the school.
So the same thing that we did last year would be a similar procedure. We would, if the nurse would look at the child, and if we felt that that was a possible COVID case, parents would be contacted, and we have a couple of options. Number one, parents can take the child and have the child tested. And if the child's negative, they can come right back to school. And if the child is not negative, if they're positive, then they would need to meet the return to school criteria. If the parent opts not to test the child, yet they are symptomatic and it appears to be that, they would still need to meet the return to school criteria.
But they don't need to show a negative or a positive COVID test to you?
You mean like once, if they've met the criteria, the 10 days have passed? Correct. Correct.
So they don't need to prove that they did or did not have COVID?
As long as they meet the return to school criteria.
Okay. They just need to have a note from the parent saying they no longer have symptoms.
Right. And the 10 days have passed.
And all
fever
that?
free. Yep.
Okay.
So as far as the county's COVID color meter, as far as I understand it, the proposal here, the only thing Lamar CISD is going to peg that to is that if the county is on red, the front office staff will screen visitors for fever. Is that
the
correct?
Screening, either one of us can answer this one. It's the screening questions that we asked last year. I think it's the 5 screening questions that the campuses asked last year. It would be the same screening procedure.
All before and after school activities can still take place. All groups that utilize those buildings can still come in and function normally.
Before and after school. Yeah, before and after school.
For now. I reserve my time.
I just wanted to thank the administration for the work that they put into this, and also for the addition of looking into virtual options. Our options are pretty limited in terms of funding, but I think that it's important that we provide options to our families, just to research what's available for families that are hesitant to send their kids back to school given the rising numbers, and especially the students that are our youngest students that haven't had the ability to vaccinate yet. And so hopefully that comes sometime this winter. But I thank the administration for just listening to the community, taking the time on this, and for looking into that.
Any other questions?
I-
Ms. Danzer?
Under cleaning and disinfecting, staff will e-miss district facilities on a monthly basis. If there seems to be an outbreak in a specific building that shows more children are having it from one area, would you do it?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, the whole idea behind EMIS when we first started was pre-pandemic to really
And then
knock
we
down
started
the
it
illness
early.
everywhere. So, and throughout all last year, if we had any type of illness, if a principal would call us and say the nurse has seen we have some type of stomach bug in the first grade, can y'all come and EMIS those classrooms? We did it that night. So that's something that's going to continue now that we have the ability and the number of those machines throughout the district, that will just be a part of our process moving forward.
So everything's monthly, but maybe even more, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to encourage the administration to encourage the staff, because we had a speaker, student in this room in March of this year who said, and back then the district mandated masks because of what was going on in the state. Now, the school district does not have the ability to mandate masks. So we had a report of a student saying that she was and her friends were basically bullied by certain staff members at certain times for not wearing the mask properly. So I want to make sure that our staff in all of our buildings, from the district level down to the campus level, does not harass in any way, shape, or form kids who do or do not wear masks. It's not something that we can enforce, and if a kid's not doing it, there shouldn't be any type of intimidation or sarcastic comments or anything, because
Or-
evidently that was an issue towards the end of last school year.
Or that we don't allow other children to bully children that do choose to wear a mask. If we see it happening, it should not be allowed.
Absolutely. It's optional.
It is
should-
optional, 100%,
And that comes from the governor.
yes.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, the culture that we're trying to set, and we have set in Lamar CISD, is one that everybody is treated with honor, respect, and dignity. And so, and you get everybody, you know, pretty much everyone has heard my story now 4 or 5 times. And so, you know, I was that kid that could have been in that boat. And so, making sure that our students are around the adults that speak life into them, that care about them, is our number one priority. And so, that would not be tolerated. But, you know, and we were very clear in here to say that, and we could change and say anyone that decides to or not to wear a mask, we will support.
Yes.
And so we're going to support your choice.
And Dr. Nivens, I'd like to clarify one thing. We did talk about the return to school criteria and work. Those are different than the UIL criteria. The UIL does require a doctor's note to return to UIL participation. So, but that is a different criteria set by UIL.
So to be clear, TEA, Texas Education Agency, and the UIL are governing entities for Texas Public Schools. And so when they speak, if they use the word shall, that means it's not optional. If they say may, that means it is optional. But those 2 entities are governing entities for Texas Public Schools. And right now, the word is shall with the UIL for provide a doctor's note upon return to extracurricular activities.
And that would apply to all athletic events and plays, musicals, those kinds of.
Yes, sir. Everything that's governed by UIL, yes, sir. All extracurricular activities, yes, sir.
So is that gonna be, all of this information is gonna be disseminated to all of our students, all of our teachers? They're all gonna get all of this information. They're all gonna know.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We have a pretty robust communications department, and we'll do everything we can to make sure we over communicate this.
That's right.
Over communicate.
We over communicate. And so, if I may say, you know, I'm really thankful to the team and I'm thankful to the board. You know, this is it's a topic that is not easy to have, and a conversation is not easy to have. And so, as leaders, what I've talked to the team about, you know, no matter what we do, it's going to be right. I mean, no matter what we do, we're going to be wrong. And so, you know, we just have to, you know, move forward and make the best decisions we can, and make sure we follow guidelines and follow policy, and do the best we can. But we know, no matter what we do, we're going to be wrong. And so, I appreciate the team for listening to me and having to pivot on a dime. And this morning I'm giving out different directions and guidance. And so, and even, you know, just a couple hours ago, the commissioner got online and gave us some different directions and guidelines. And so who's to say tomorrow he won't do the same thing. But anyway, I just want to show my appreciation to the board and especially to the staff for dealing with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the COVID protocols for the next school year as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Brunzell seconds. Any discussion, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
All right.
And say, or any opposed? Okay, none opposed, the motion carries. All right, now we are moving on to item 4A1, the budget update. And before Ms. Ludwig comes up, I just wanted to say a little something. So we created at our last meeting a budget committee, and the budget committee, everything okay?
I'm gonna try and fix theirs. If there's not too much of a disruption, they're dropped off the connection.
They're all,
Okay.
Well, mine, I think, is always red.
we all
Oh,
have
on
kind of
that,
a
yeah.
funny look on ours.
Well, I can talk while we're doing that.
Right.
So anyways, like I was saying, at our last meeting, we created a budget committee, and I have appointed Trustee Hunt as the chairman of that committee, and he's done a wonderful job so far, and we've gotten to meet 2 times as a committee, and it's been very helpful. And so Trustee Hunt is going to brief us on how that's been going.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had 2 meetings so far, and this is the first time that the board, in recent memory, has had an opportunity to have a budget committee meeting. And so when Dr. Nivens came on board, we decided that we were going to dive a little bit deeper into the budgeting process. It's one of the major functions that the board has. So the purpose of the committee is to provide the board with in-depth information regarding the development of the budget, and it gives us an opportunity to drive the major budgetary decisions. The goal of the committee is to ensure financial stability and student success by having regular, meaningful discussions regarding how funding decisions impact our delivery of instruction and the monetary impact on our stakeholders and constituents. And this year, there's a lot of financial and budgetary decisions to be made with federal funding and that's affecting COVID-19 and money that's available to help our students that have suffered from COVID learning loss. And so I appreciate the team and Ms. Ludwig and her team for providing us with a really robust review of their budgeting process, and then providing us with options that we can then consider and provide recommendations to the full board. So it's a process that we're going to continue to evolve. We've had two meetings so far. It's the first year that we're doing it, but so far it's been really impactful, really meaningful discussions, and we'll just continue to evolve it and get better and better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Good evening. Yvonne is passing out a copy of the presentation.
And while you're passing that, I want to say that Trustee Hubenak, myself, and Trustee Hunt are the 3 on the budget committee. I just mentioned Chairman Booth.
All right, so the main purpose or focus of the meeting tonight, as far as the budget is concerned, is to meet some truth in taxation requirements. We've got to vote on the date of the meeting to discuss the budget and the tax rate, and also to vote on the tax rate to be published in the notice. We'll be providing the information to the paper tomorrow, and the notice will run this weekend. With respect to the 2021-22 budget workshop, there are several items on our agenda. First, thank you for mentioning our committee work the other night, and I too think that it's a great process and a way for us to communicate more fully and in depth on our budget process. We talked tonight. We'll talk about ESSER 3 funding as well as the other ESSER funds that are available. I'll provide the results of our ESSER 3 survey, and also the spending plan that we've reflected in our application that was submitted to TEA on July 27th. We'll talk a little bit about the 3 budgets that are required to have official budgets adopted by the board. Those are the general fund, the debt service fund, and the child nutrition fund. Within that, we'll also talk about virtual instruction and the percentage of attendance we'll use in our projections and things like that. All right, with respect to ESSER 3 funding, we did a survey, and first it was posted on our website, and the respondents were first asked to respond to which stakeholder category they were in. We had a little over 1,300 people respond to this. However, 925 actually completed the survey, which means that some of those participants probably fell into more than one category. So you can see here that a little bit over 70% were parents and family. followed by 17%, 27% that were teachers and 17% that were students. The first question we asked was whether first of all, we wanted them to rate whether the item we were asking about was very important, moderately important, slightly important, or not important at all. So the first question we asked had to do with tutoring, after-school programs, summer learning programs, or additional school days to help close learning gaps. And as you can see, almost 60% felt that was very important, and over 21% felt like it was moderately important. The next thing we asked was whether we should use the ESSER III money to provide instructional materials, resources, programs, and/or activities. Of course, 74% felt that was very important. The next question was regarded virtual education and learning. Almost 40% thought that was very important, and almost 21% thought it was, well, actually 20% felt it was either moderately or slightly important. The fifth question had to do with whether we should provide technology, which would include hardware, software, and connectivity for online learning. Also assistive or adaptive technology for students with disabilities, and over 57% felt that was very important. The sixth question was whether we should provide activities to ensure the unique needs of children with disabilities are met. And you can see 72% felt that was very important. We asked whether activities to improve career and technical education programs were important, and almost 60% felt it was very important, and almost 26% felt that was moderately important. We asked about the unique needs of English language learners and providing more activities for those groups, and almost 56% felt that was very important. We also asked about activities to ensure that we met the needs of students with disabilities. So almost 70%, plus the moderately important, so very or moderately is the bulk of those responses. Our 10th question was whether we should provide activities to ensure the unique needs of students experiencing homelessness and youth in foster care are met, including outreach and service delivery. Over 70% felt that was very important. We also asked about administering and using high-quality diagnostic assessments and tools. You can see over 51% felt that was very important. We asked about training and professional development for teachers and other staff. 63% felt that was very important. And then we asked about social and emotional counseling and wellness supports for students and staff. And you can see over 71% that felt that was very important. We're getting to the end of the survey. We asked about providing information assistance to parents and families to help them effectively support their students. About 65% felt that was important. And we asked about purchasing cleaning supplies to sanitize the facilities, and also providing PPE and things like that. Almost 64% felt that was very important. As I mentioned earlier, we have several pots of ESSER money. In the 1920 school year, the feds released the first pot of ESSER money, which was ESSER 1. The district received a little over $3.5 million in that money, and it actually supplanted our regular state aid. So we just reclassified some expenditures to utilize those funds. ESSER 2 funds will be released soon, and the district will receive a little over $14.5 million of those funds. And right now we're in the process of determining how we will spend $32.659 million over a 3-year period in ESSER 3 funds. So the important piece there is, well, there's two important pieces. It's 3-year money, and so we have 3 years to utilize all of it. And then there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. They've released the Phase 1 money, and we've filed our application for that. And it was a little over $21.77 million. And then Phase 2 will be about $10.9 million. Our spending plan is going to include a number of big chunks. First of all, we are required to set aside 20% of the funds to address learning loss, and that's $4.354 million. We'll use $5 million to cover potential deficits in the 2021 fiscal year, especially those relating to pandemic-related expenditures. We're also looking at stipends, extra duty pay, and other types of funding in response to the pandemic of $4.46 million. And then we've got some other allocations of $7.955 million. I'll go through in more detail of the 20% and also the annual allocations.
Just a second, Jill. Can you go back to the slide?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the $5 million deficit? Because I think we need to make that clear as far as where that's coming from and who we're waiting on to get to reimburse us.
Okay. We are these funds are. Although they do have a lot of restrictions and strings attached, we're also able to cover prior expenditures, especially those that relate to the pandemic and expenditures we've made in the past. Those are expenditures that were not budgeted in our original budget for 2021. And so they can include things like salaries, supplies, laptops, and things like that. And so should we be in a deficit position for the 2021 year, we can cover those deficits with the ESSER 3 funds, which helps us in our long-term fund balance position.
So to put it simply, Jill is being nice about it. And so there was some money that Lamar spent last year due to the pandemic that wasn't budgeted. And so there's a process where we submit that money or submit that request for reimbursement to.
It'll run through TEA.
It'll run through TEA.
Eventually, it'll be audited by TEA and the federal government.
And so we have requested our money, and so now we're waiting on the reimbursement of that. And so what Jill's been doing, she's been calling TEA and she's been calling the auditor about the process and where are we with that, and they're taking a pretty long time with it. And so now, since we're about to go into the new budget year, we're going to have to really show that as a deficit from last year. Hopefully, we can get that reimbursed for that this year. But it's we're still waiting on them. And so I've told Jill that she can activate me when she needs me to make some phone calls to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, because we were all told last year during the pandemic that districts do whatever you have to do to take care of kids. Every superintendent in the state was told that. Do whatever you have to do to take care of kids, and you will get your money back. And all did that. And so now we're running into this roadblock to where every superintendent, every school district, every school board, every teacher, every principal did what they needed to do to take care of students. And now we are facing a roadblock to be reimbursed for those dollars. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah.
Can I ask I think I know the answer to this. Where did we get the money that we used? Was that just from our regular fund?
Well, we amended the budget
Right.
in order to have a budget there to spend, but it will probably put us in a deficit for this fiscal year. So actually what we're hoping is that this application will be approved and we'll actually be able to book the reclassification of expenditures and not have a deficit. Okay. But it all depends on the timing of TEA.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, as I said, we've got to set aside 20% of the ESSER 3 money to address learning loss. So we feel like some of our priorities should be addressing behavioral supports for students with disabilities and special ed students. You'll see there's 2 categories of tutoring that we'd like to utilize. Also enhance our summer school programming, and also provide social emotional support programming, and then expand or continue some of our counseling programs. And so that will, over the 3-year period, will total $4.354 million. And one thing I did not mention is that even though we have to be pretty strict on our budget for the application, we do have some flexibility where we can amend that and move those funds around as well. So this is the big category of almost $8 million. And, I wanted to tell you too, over in the description where you see the parentheses with the numbers, the first one, 6 and 9, those correlate to our survey questions. So we can prove, to TEA that we're actually doing the survey, taking advantage of the results, and making sure we're addressing what our community feels like our highest priorities are. So I put the numbers over, the correlation over there on this one, but they're actually over on the right on this slide. So the first one, you can see it addresses questions 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11. So the first one, we're employing a platform called MAP to provide, it's a universal screener to provide assessments for reading, math, and science, expanding Canvas for $375,000 over the 3-year period, purchasing differentiating reading books for resource and inclusion classes, which is also a special ed need, purchasing supplies and materials and technology. We have added some additional staff at 1621 Place. We will be supplementing our funding for Edgenuity and also some counseling staff. We are looking at expanding our library resources and also adding some reading and math coaches at the secondary level. So you can see how that breaks down over the 3 years. All right, moving on to the general fund, which is the first of the 3 funds that we have to adopt a board-adopted budget for.
Can I ask a question real fast?
Sure.
So, once you allocate funds for staff for these 3 years, what happens to that staff when there's not funding for them after the 3 years?
There are, Dr. Bowen may want to add to this, but typically what we do is we tell the staff that they are on temporary funding sources.
Okay.
And that when the funding goes away, then the position goes away.
Could go away unless, yeah.
Yes, however, typically what happens is with the rapid growth that we have and the addition of teachers every year, we can usually absorb them, somewhere else.
Just as long as they're made aware that
we try very hard to keep the
could
people
happen.
that we hire.
We hope we can keep you, but
At the
it's basically
we're adding positions
yeah.
each year. I do not see that stopping in the next 3 years, so that should not be an issue. Yeah, there are other positions for them to
move into. Okay.
And as far as the materiality of the funds that we've got allocated, it's not that many units, so I feel confident we'll be able to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so our at the current time, our projected revenue budget is $375.276 million, with almost an even split between local and state revenues, and then about 1% of federal revenues in the amount of $3.9 million. Local revenues include mainly property taxes, penalties and interest, investment earnings, athletic revenues, and things like that. And then, of course, your state revenues are typically, the bulk is your formula funding. One important point this year, our property values have increased almost 10%, 9.8% over last year, which is similar to our growth in 2020 of values. So the details of our revenue budget are here. So $182.6 million is our property tax revenue and also delinquent taxes. The next biggest category is your state per capita and foundation school program money, which is almost $168 million. We typically like to show you how the revenue budget and the expenditure budget has changed since the previous meeting. So your last meeting was on June 15th, And since then, we've looked at data, adjusted estimates, adjusted our projection of attendance and various other things that you see here. And we've increased our revenue budget by a little over $8.9 million. With respect to the state funding formula, we have filed our application for the new instructional facilities allotment, and so that's added $719,000. A little bit of money relating to our transportation allotment because we've filed our route services report for the year. We've had a resubmission for PEMS of the 2021 student data, and that resulted in about $25,000 more funding. CTE now has to be reported in several different categories based on the level of the courses that the students are taking, and the funding weights are different for those different levels. So that's generating almost $600,000 more in funding. The local fund assignment relates to the local school district share of the total state funding formula. And so when the comptroller's office increases our property values for the funding formula, then our state aid goes down. So we lost $1.8 million due to that. There's been a change in the formula for the fast growth allotment, which generated almost $8.4 million. We have seen the return of the gifted and talented allotment, which provided a little over $638,000. And then due to all of these different changes, that resulted in a change to our Tier 2 allotment of almost $383,000. And then due to some of these formula changes, category changes occurred, which resulted in about $19,000 additional from the available school fund. If there's any questions on revenues, I'd be happy to answer those at this time. We are taking the committee's recommendation to use 94.5% attendance rate. It's conservative due to concerns about the pandemic, but yet it's still close to our average historical attendance as well.
So the collection rate for property taxes is what, roughly?
We're using 98.5% collection rate.
If I remember right, the current budget, well, up to this point, has been $337 million. Is that right?
The original budget was $337. Right. It's been amended several times during the year.
And we're going to go to the $375 million.
Yes.
Of that $375 million, is it still 80 to 83% for staff salaries and benefits?
It's usually 85 to 86%.
Is it that high? Mm-hmm. So 86% of the $375 million is just to cover people.
Right.
Mom, you want to calculate that?
Quick, if you the next, so it's around 85.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to use 86 when I talk. 86%.
It wavers, but you should be able to take the 318 and divide by the 375, and hopefully it'll be close.
And might I add, Trustee Wells, you can see the increase because we're a fast growth school district, and we're constantly adding schools and adding staff. So this year we're going to open up 3 schools alone. And I'm not sure how many more I think we're expected to open up 1 a year for the next 10, 12 years, at least. And so that's where that significant increases come from, is just adding additional schools and staff.
Yes.
We're also adding more homes, so we're getting more tax base.
Exactly. So as you can see, of the $375.276 million, 318.2 roughly is payroll costs. Since our June 15th meeting, we've increased expenditures $3.466 million, and the biggest 2 pieces of that are, first of all, during our budget process, we estimate what what the salaries are gonna be the next year based on current staff plus expected growth positions and things like that. And then there's a point in time where we replace that estimate with our actual salary budget out of our finance system. And so that resulted in, a change of, did I do that?
No, I did, I'm sorry. Everybody's back.
That,
Our stopped connecting with yours. They've got these papers though. It's not gonna work.
That's okay. But there's people that don't, they want to see it.
Yeah, we have a hard time with the presentation, so if we have it again, we'll do it. We'll follow along.
So in that transition, the budgetary change was 1.361 million, which is not very much, really, not material at all when you think about our salary budget being, over $250 million. We also had some departmental budget estimate changes. The bulk of that being the addition of utility budgets for some of the new schools. Actually, just adjustments to budgets. And then we've also got a budget of 1.2 million in there for the virtual conferencing with the new COVID protocols. The big ticket items include 262 million for salaries, 56 million in benefits, a little over 10 million in utilities. And you can see there, technology is another big category, 8.75 million. And then insurance and tax collection fees are another about 4.5 million.
One of the things that we want to add are some figures to the virtual instruction. And remember that the virtual instruction piece is not going to be allowable for ADA funding. So we wanted to give a perspective on this. If we were to look at last year, at the last 9 weeks at the elementary level, of all of our kids on virtual instruction, we had 3,609. The ADA for those kids amounted to $21.6 million for elementary. When you begin to look at secondary, we had 6,782 students out at the 6 weeks, with a total of $40.6 million or $0.7 million of ADA funding. And then the total is $62.3 million or 0.4 collectively of kids that were in virtual instruction, where TEA was providing us the availability of getting ADA for those kids. And as we begin to look and launch, as we're investigating that K-6 option for those that are still fearful of the virus, we also are being very mindful of the cost at the district perspective as we continue to look at the numbers.
So with all that being said, excuse me, we're looking at a balanced budget of $375.276 million. Moving on to the debt service fund, we have revenue resources of $82.184 million. Predominantly, that's made up of property tax revenue of $76.973 million. Delinquent taxes, additional $550,000. And then we're going to utilize some accrued interest of a little over $3 million. And this year's hold harmless state aid is $1.779 million. The expenditure budget is at $82.184 million, where $82.1 million of it is just principal and interest on the bonds. Our current INS rate, which pays for the principal and interest on the bonds, is 35 cents for the 2021 year. We're looking at 37 cents for the 21-22 year. As you can see from the chart, our M&O rate right now is the lowest it's been in 10 years. And overall, we would be proposing a rate that's about $1.27 this year, but the proposed rate for 21-22 would be $1.24. So that's actually an overall reduction of about 3 cents. So we've got a decrease in the M&O rate of 5 cents and an increase in the INS rate of 2. So a net of 3 cents savings.
So before you move forward on that, Jill, I want to make sure that we don't get by that without celebrating all the decisions that have been made by this board and the staff in the past. Because it's actually been longer than 10 years, so we're still lowering the tax rate. And so even, I want to say it hadn't been this low in maybe 12 or 13 years. And so in the past and under Jill's leadership, we've been doing a great job at using what we have inside the school district to make sure that we don't pass on that cost to our taxpayers, that we be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so I just want to applaud Jill and her team for that and for being intentional about making sure we have the right kind of planning and the right people in place to make sure we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Joe, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
If the growth in Fort Bend County continues as it's projected, do you anticipate this rate staying the same or going lower every year for the foreseeable future?
So there's 2 parts to the tax rate. The M&O rate has decreased a lot this year due to the maximum compressed rate, which is part of our state funding formula. Because our values grew faster than the anticipated rate of the state, we're caused to reduce our rate. So that's part of it. But as far as the INS rate, we will continue to build schools and issue bonds. So, of course, our principal and interest will continue to grow. However, our 10% growth really helps when it comes to keeping the tax rate low. We use predominantly tax revenue, but we also use the interest that's earned on the bonds to also manage the tax rate. So hopefully, we've been able to keep the INS rate either the same or actually we've been able to lower it in some years by using a lot of different tactics, and using all the funds we have available to keep that rate low, and we'll continue to do that. This 2 cents will also help us to accommodate the bonds we'll sell this year and next year relating to the 2020 bond. All right, that being said, as I've said, this year our current rate is 1.2691, made up of 0.9191, so about 92 cents of it being the M&O rate and 35 cents being the INS rate. And then our proposed rate for 21-22 is 1.242, being 0.872 being for the M&O fund, and 37 cents being for interest and sinking. What we need for the board to do this evening is to vote on the date that we'll discuss the budget and the tax rate in the public, and then also vote on the rate that we'll publish in our notice. The last fund that I'd like to cover real quick is child nutrition. We have a balanced budget there of $17.54 million. The revenues are generated from breakfast and lunch sales and federal money. And of course, on the expenditure side, the salary and benefits is also the larger piece. Of the $17.5 million, $9.5 million is supplies and materials, food costs, things like that, and about $7.7 million are the payroll and benefits costs. So at this point, I can answer questions, or we're ready to vote on the date.
Ms. Stanford, is this too early to ask, or should I even bring it up? Does this include a salary raise for our teachers this year?
It does. We have an average 3%, which would be a 3% of the midpoint. And right now, I can't remember what the flat amount for teachers is. $1,950 for teachers. We've looked at so many options, I've already forgotten.
Did you say 3% was the average?
Yes, and the 1950 is an average on the teacher scale also.
I'm sure there's people tuned in tonight to hear that.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, so, all right, so do I have a motion to, let's see, let me get to my page here. Do I have a motion to approve the date for the public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Stanziger makes a motion.
Do we have to state the date?
Do I?
Yeah, let's state the date.
Don't we have to state the date?
August 19th.
Yes, August 19th.
Okay. I make the motion to vote for August 19th.
And Mr. Humack, he still seconds it. All right, all in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? All right, none opposed, motion carries. All right, now we're moving on to the next item, which is 4A1C, I believe. Yes. This is approval of the proposed tax rate that will be published in the notice for the public meeting on page 5.
So Ms. Lovely, can you go back over the M&O INS tax rates and the total so we can write it in and then we can make the motion?
Yes. So the proposed M&O rate is 0.872. And the INS rate is 0.37, making the total rate 1.242, a little over $1.24.
So do I have a motion to approve the tax rate?
I will make a motion, yes, to
Okay.
approve tax rate of
Mr. Votes?
124 total. Oh, maintenance and operation of 0.872, and the interest and sinking of 0.37, for a total of $242.
I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Bronzell seconds that. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Lovely.
Thank you.
Let's see, so this completes the action items. We will not go into closed session this evening, so the time is 7:48 p.m. We are adjourning the closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 5. Oh, sorry, I just have not. We're now, the meeting is adjourned. It is 7:48 p.m.